And I see the recording. Good morning, all. Welcome to Novolug. Today we have CarstenStrotmann from Germany, all the way from Germany, talk to us about Nix and NixOS. If you have any questions, please hold them till the end, and he'll field them then. And just a reminder, this thing's going to be recorded so we can put it up on YouTube later. So without further ado, Carsten, please kick it off. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Mute your screens to save some of us that are lacking in bandwidth, so that, or sorry, your video, so that way those of us lacking in bandwidth get a little bit better performance. And also, don't forget to mute your mics. But anyhow, without further ado, sorry for the false start. Go ahead and start, Carsten.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. I'm here to tell you a little bit about Nix and NixOS. And I think that's the future of Linux distributions, at least for me. So I just want to give you an insight what that is so that you can make up your mind yourself. I'm not trying to evangelize everyone here and say that you must switch from your Debians and Fedoras and Arch Linuxes. But it's always good to have more choice, and Nix and NixOS are more choice. So about myself, I'm a computer nerd living in the northwest of Germany in a place called Münsterland, and I'm interested in operating systems, not only the Linuxes, but also the BSDs and macOS and Plan 9 and strange ones like Serenity OS. I do retro computing as a hobby with old machines. And for a living, I'm a trainer and consultant for DNS, DNSSEC, DANE, encrypted DNS, IPv6 and DHCP. I like the lean internet, so I'm working with Gopher, the Gemini protocol, and FujiNet, which is some networking stuff for old retro computings. If I find time, I do some programming. I like Emacs, and I do pen and paper role-playing games as a hobby as well. So the software installation on classic Linux distributions like Debian, Ubuntu, Red Hat, Arch Linux, Void, and so on. Usually, and I've done that for the last 25 years or so, you do an OS installation, so the initial installation of the operating system of the Linux, and then you do some initial software installation via a packet manager. The software that you always need and use on every system. Follow that is the initial configuration of your system. And then later on, you add more software and more configuration. And then you loop back to more software, more configuration, and so on, whenever you need that. So that is an iterative approach, one step at a time, and the system grows over time. However, that is hard to replicate, and that creates unique machines that people are eager to preserve, and they are fearful not to lose them. This is also possibly the reason why people want to upgrade from older systems to newer systems instead of doing a clean, fresh install, even though a clean, fresh install from time to time would be the best choice, because every system, no matter how good the packet manager is, leaves always some garbage behind. And even Linux systems, they tend to fill up with old unused stuff when you use them over 10 or more years. People have been in search for solutions here, and certainly one solution that I've seen the last years are configuration orchestration tools, such as Terraform, Ansible, SaltStack, and others. But these solutions, they are external to the Linux distribution ecosystem. So the distribution's packet manager doesn't know about Ansible and its friends. It's something that is bolted on to the Linux distribution. It's not integrated into the Linux distribution in any way. Which brings us to Nix. So what is Nix? First, Nix is a packet manager. So it's something like Yum or DNF or apt or Pacman. It's multi-platform, currently running on Linux 32-bit Intel, 64-bit Intel, and ARM 64. And you can also use that in macOS. And I guess there are people who work on porting that to other platforms as well at the moment. Nix can be used in addition to the platform's packaging infrastructure. So you can use Nix on Debian or Ubuntu alongside apt. You can use it on a Red Hat system alongside Yum or DNF, or you can use it on an Arch Linux alongside Pacman. It doesn't conflict with these. It is licensed under the MIT license, so it's open source, but it's not free software for some people because it's not GPL. We come to that a little bit later. Nix is also, besides being the packet manager, it's also a programming language, but it's not a full-featured general purpose language. So at least it's not designed to like program games in it. Maybe you can, haven't tried. It's a functional language. It's lazy in the case that it only evaluates the parts that are really needed. And it's pure in a way that it doesn't have side effects. And its main job is to describe software packages or compositions of packages or any changes to existing packages. So it's purely functional, and it treats the packages like values in a pure functional programming language. Meaning the packages are built by functions that don't have any side effects. So the packages never change after they have been built. The files in the package never change. You can mount them read-only, and effectively in a Nix system, they are read-only. You shouldn't and you can't change the content of the packages after installing. Also, given that you use the very same Nix functions to create your packages, you always get the same binary packages out of that. So that creates reproducible packages or reproducible builds that also other distributions aim to get. And then there is NixOS. And NixOS is a full GNU Linux distribution. It's built around the Nix packet manager. So it has everything the Nix packet manager has, but it's not Nix on Debian or Nix on Ubuntu. It's its own Linux system in its own right. It does declarative system configuration, meaning you don't build the system iteratively, one step at a time. Instead, you give the Nix packet manager a file that describes how your system should look like. And then you tell Nix, please change my system in a way that it matches the configuration that I've written down, the declarative system configuration. It does reliable and atomic upgrades, meaning that it's guaranteed during an upgrade that it doesn't break anything. While you do the upgrade, you can still use the system. And unlike in other modern systems where, like if you do a full system upgrade while you are in the X11 or Wayland system, some applications like browsers behave weird because their libraries have been changed under them. That doesn't happen with Nix. So this is because it never overwrites anything. So if you have a certain version of Firefox currently running and you do a system upgrade, it will install the new version of Firefox, but it will not overwrite anything from the old Firefox, nor will it overwrite any of the dependencies that the Firefox has. So it creates a new system, a new view of the system, and only if you tell it to atomically switch to the new view, then everything is new and the new software is available. But it will not make the system brittle during upgrades. That's great. Also, you can do rollbacks. if you see a regression after an upgrade, you still have the older generation, like the last 20 generations of your system, still on your disk. And you can either directly switch from the command line back to a previous generation, or you can reboot, and then in the group boot manager, you can select one of the previous generations and you boot into that previous generation and you have your old system back. It also creates reproducible system configurations, while Nix as the packet manager creates reproducible packages. The Nix OS allows you to create reproducible Linux installations. So in everything, including the packages and the configurations. NixOS is source-based with binaries. Now that sounds strange here. So in a sense, it's like Gen 2. So it can compile everything from source. What Nix does is, if someone compiles a package from source, it records the a cryptographic hash, SHA-256 hash of that build. And then it looks in on the server side of the Nix project whether that binary package is already there. And if not, it uploads that to a system called the cache. And if other people install the system and install a package, the package manager will first look. It will calculate the same hash from the Nix function, from the configuration, look in the cache, look if exactly that package with that configuration has been built before by someone else. And if it does, and if it is available in the cache, it will download that from the cache. So most of the time, I would say 90% of the time, you get binary packages, which are exactly the packages that you have configured. So even if you create a derivation from the package, like with classical Linux distributions, you have these problems that because the distribution's maintainer, they don't know what you need, what the users need. So they enable all the features available. So for example, you get maybe an application that can talk to a database. And that application has database access for MySQL, for PostgreSQL, maybe for a third SQL database and for SQLite enabled, even though it only makes sense to use one of them. In Nix, in the configuration, you would configure your system like I use PostgreSQL, and then you only get the package compiled with the support for PostgreSQL, not MySQL and SQLite and anything what you don't need. Still, you have the benefits of binary packages, of binary downloads, if someone else has a very similar, has the same configuration, not similar, exactly the same configuration and has uploaded that to the cache. So that means source-based with binaries. It has all the major features that people expect from a Linux distribution. So it has a GUI, it has X11 and Wayland, it has KDE Plasma, GNOME, or i3 or Sway or any of the popular desktop stuff. It's systemd based. So that if you don't like systemd, then NixOS isn't for you. Then you can use Nix on your Devuan or a Void Linux or something like that. That would still work, but NixOS is heavily systemd based. And you need to be able to work with systemd there. It has all the popular software that people expect from a Linux distribution. So your Emacs, your Vim, Apache, Nginx, Postfix, and the likes are all there. It has in total, as of yesterday, of some 40,000 packages that are in the repositories there. It has automatic hardware detection. So after installation, it will look at your system. It will detect what kind of hardware you have, whether you have an EFI system or a BIOS system, whether you have a 32 or 64-bit, of course, what kind of hard drives you have, and it will create a hardware configuration automatically that you then just need to tweak. It also detects whether it is running in a virtual machine. So for example, if you run it in VMware or VirtualBox, it will select the support driver packages for these virtual machines automatically. It's not a beginner's distribution, not at all. So it's not for people who want to make their first steps into the Linux world. It's rough at some edges, and you need to be comfortable on the command line in order to work with NixOS. And then there is Home Manager. And Home Manager is the concept of Nix applied to home directories. It's a system for managing the user environment of users. So everything that lives in the home directory. It builds on the same libraries and also the same packages that the Nix package manager uses. And it allows a per user installation of packages without root permissions. So as a normal user, you can add new packages to your environment. They will be installed in your user's path. However, the packages itself, the binaries, are only stored once. So if you have 100 users and 50 of these users decide that they need Python, it's not that you have 50 copies of Python on your system. You just have one copy, and you have 50 symlinks from the central store to each user's home directory where that user has selected to have Python in there. This is really neat. So when I use Nix and NixOS on a system, my operating system is very, very minimal. It only is like the Linux kernel, the core utils, so ls and cut and these that people expect from a POSIX system. And then maybe an editor that I need, something like Emacs, and maybe a Tmax for a terminal multiplexer. But that's all that I install. And everything else is then installed as a user. And that only lives in the user environment and user view, and not in the whole operating system. That is sometimes a little bit strange, because if you do sudo or su and you become root, you have a very minimal system. While as a user, you have all the tools that you have installed in your user environment. You might be missing that as root, but I find that a good restriction, because it also forces me to do as much as possible as a normal user and not log in as root or sudo to root and then work from there. And then there is GUIX and GUIX SD. I just want to mention that because GUIX and GUIX SD is like the GNU flavored fork of the Nix idea. GUIX is the GNU Unix package and system manager. And while Nix and NixOS are MIT licensed, GUIX and GUIX SD are GPL licensed. And they only have free software, while Nix is very pragmatic and has BSD licensed software and other licensed software there, which are not strictly free software, but open source. Also, instead of the Nix language, GUIX is using Scheme as the underlying configuration declaration language, and Scheme is general purpose language. So you can program a game there in the configuration if you like to. GUIX and GUIX SD is also a very interesting system. I like that very much. But it's a younger system. And Nix is, in my view, a little bit more mature, more stable than GUIX and GUIX SD. But one major benefit of GUIX SD is that you can have hurt instead of Linux there. So the hurt kernel also runs in GUIX SD. So starting with Nix, what will you do if you start? Installing Nix, this is installing Nix on a regular Linux system, not on NixOS, because on NixOS, Nix is the corner of that system and it's already there. But if you want to have Nix on your Debian or Fedora Linux, you, as a normal user, but with sudo privileges, as people do nowadays. I don't like that, but seems to be the modern trend here. The stuff people do is to pipe a script from the internet without viewing into a shell, and then it does. What's better here than others that do this is that the Nix installer explains every step it does and shows every command it submits before it's doing that. However, you need to trust the script about that as well. But as we see, there are also alternatives. You can install from source, and this is what I often do as well. After installation, you verify that the installation was successful. With nix shell -p nix info, you run the nix info command, and if that works and if that doesn't give you any error message, then installation of the Nix system was successful, and you can then start using Nix on your machine. This is how you install from source. For people who are used to installing from source, this is nothing special. You clone from the GitHub repository. You bootstrap, which is basically calling autoconf and automake to create the configure file. Then you do the configure, maybe with some options, make install, and you're done. The first thing on a non-NixOS system that I do is install the home manager. Nix also allows you to manage a Linux system in the old iterative style with nix-env-e. A nix-env-e installs one package or multiple packages. So you can use nix-env as any other package manager and do nix-env-e Emacs, nix-env-e Vim, nix-env-e Apache, and so on and so forth to fill your machine. However, then you're missing one of the major benefits, which is the declarative style. You don't have written down how your configuration should look like. And Home Manager gives you that. If you don't use NixOS, Home Manager gives you that in an easy way. There are other ways to achieve the same goal, but I find Home Manager the easiest one. So once Home Manager is there, you can then start configuring the Home Manager's config file and describe there what packages and what configuration you want. So the important part and the workhorse of a Nix system is the Nix store. And that is located usually under /nix in the root directory. And that contains all the binaries and config files that then are then linked later on in the user's environment, in the search path of the users. If you have a Nix system, especially a NixOS system, the file system layout can look weird to old school Linux hackers. For example, here, this is an ls-l on the Unix system root on my NixOS machine. And it only contains a bin directory, and that bin directory only contains one binary, which is env, which is needed for scripting. There's no user share, there's no lib, there's no local or anything that you would expect from a Linux system. It's empty and it's just there because scripts need that, but everything else is gone. So about the workflow working with Nix and Home Manager. Usually you start looking for packages, and the command nix search and then some search term, which can be a regular expression, will search for the Nix store and the Nix repository and the cache for packages. You can also go into the internet, and I follow the link here to the search.nixos.org website, packages, and there you can select the channel. In Nix and NixOS, you have stable channels, and you have the unstable rolling release. And the stable channels are year.month when the packages in that were snapshotted and declared stable. So this is the latest stable branch is from March this year, and I can search here as well. So searching for everything Emacs, and then it gives me the list of all the good Emacsy stuff that is in Nix packages. So this is a good count, 9,324 packages. Once I know the name of the package, I either install the package globally. So I added the etc NixOS configuration.nix file, and that has a structure called environment.system-packages. And there I list the packages that I want to have on my systems there. And this is a text file, and I can commit that into a Git repository. And then I can, from the Git repository, clone and sync that with all my other machines, meaning that all my Nix machines have the same packages. Even if I'm working on machine number A this day, and I decide, oh, I need this package, or I learned about a new package and say, oh, this is cool, I should have that on in my environment. I put that in that file, commit the changes to GitHub, and all my other machines, when they boot up, they pull the changes from GitHub, build the new configuration, and I have the tool on every machine. I don't need to remember to install that. Once I change that file, I do run NixOS rebuild switch, and NixOS rebuild will read that configuration file, create a new system configuration, and as a last step, it will flip just one major symlink from my old configuration to the new configuration. And that is the atomic part of the updates. So it does everything in the background, and only as the last step, it switches a symbolic link. And after that switch, all the changes are live and visible for me. As an alternative, I could also do a NixOS rebuild boot, and NixOS rebuild boot will create the new system configuration, but will not switch. But I have then the ability to select that new configuration on reboot in the group or in the EFI boot manager. If I don't want to have a package globally, and most of the time I don't want the packages globally, I want them per user, I do the same that I've done for what I've done for the global configuration. I do that for the home managed configuration, which lives in .config, Nix packages, home.nix, and which looks very, very similar, just home.packages. And then I list the names of the packages there. And then I run home manager switch as a user, as just the regular user. And then I have the data here. So you might now ask yourself, how does that work as a regular user if the binaries end up in /nix and not in the user's home directory? What's happening here is that the home manager calls the Nix package manager, and in the NixOS system, in the background, there is a Nix daemon running, and you can also have that on a regular Linux distribution if you install Nix there. And the Nix daemon is running with root permissions. So the home manager talks to the Nix package manager. The Nix package manager then talks via socket to the Nix daemon, and the Nix daemon will then do the installation. Once the installation is done, the home manager takes over again and makes sure that the symlinks are in the user's environment. So NixOS provides different views on the installed packages, but all packages are in the Nix store. Users just have different packages linked into their environment. You don't fill up your hard disk by using Nix. It's quite clever on how it organizes the files and the system. However, that cleverness is completely new and different from classic file system layout on Linux systems. It takes time to learn that, especially if you have to recover from catastrophic failure, like if you need to rescue a Nix system by booting from a rescue Linux CD, because if you then do a change root there, all the links are missing. There's nothing in bin or user bin or sbin, and all the usual stuff won't work. There are scripts in place in the Nix store that you can call that activates the Nix system. So it's possible to do a change root from another Linux system to revive NixOS. But this is something people have to learn new because it's different from classical Linux distributions, how that works. In addition to declarative package managing, you can also do declarative configurations. For example, the Linux operating system configuration. Here is a configuration for group. The first line tells group to install the group boot manager in dev SDA, that the root file system should be mounted from dev SDA1, and the SSH daemon should be enabled as a service. And these three lines create all the configurations. So the first line creates the group configuration accordingly. The second line creates an fstub entry, and third line creates a systemd unit file for secure shell daemon. And that also works with Home Manager for user programs. What we see here is a declarative configuration for the GNU-PG agent that keeps GPG keys in memory for easier access. Updating the system. First step is to update the channel information. Basically, that is the list of files in the repositories, the information of available packages in the Nix channel. And then you rebuild the OS with the rebuild switch -- upgrade. And that will pull in the latest version of the programs you have in your system configuration. However, it will not override the previous installed versions. It will not deinstall the previous installed versions. It will install just the new versions and link the new versions into your environment. The old versions are still there. If you don't like the new versions, you can do NixOS rebuild rollback, and you are back to your previous state. And because that doesn't really require a lot of space on disk, and disk space is also plentiful these days, you can easily have 10 or 20 generations back on your system and do time travel. You can travel back like, oh, how did my system look a year ago? Yeah, this is about the generations. Sometimes you want to make room on your hard drive. You can garbage collect older versions. You can either do that manually with the command nix collect garbage, or you can configure a trigger, like you can define in the Nix configuration. I always want to have at least 2 GB free on my storage. And if the Nix daemon sees that that is filled up, it automatically starts collecting the oldest versions still in the store and removes them. For developers, but also for regular users, the command nix shell is really, really great because it creates an ad hoc environment without the need that you first configure the packages that you need. So on the command line, you can include the listed packages and derivations from the packages that you want to have. And then the Nix system will create an environment for you containing that packages. And then it launches a shell within that environment. But the packages are only visible within that environment. So no other user will see that. Root will not see them. And also other shells from the same user will not see these packages. They are only for that one shell environment. And that's great for development because of the derivations. You can have a fixed environment with specific libraries, for example, for testing. You can test, does my application work with the that version of the library and that version of the library and that version of the library. So you have 3 different Nix shells with 3 different versions of a dependency library of your product, and then you can test that without having them installed side by side. I mean, they are installed side by side, but they are not visible all the time. Doing that in classic Unix distributions or Linux distributions is hard. Think about, this is for the people who know Python development, this is virtual environments that you have in Python, but for the whole Linux system. Here in the example, I typed in Fossil, which is a very lean source code management system. It wasn't found, command not found. I then do a Nix shell -p for package Fossil, and then it creates me a Nix shell, and there Fossil is available. And if I exit that shell, Fossil is gone. It's not gone from the disk because it's still in the Nix store. So the next time I do Nix shell -p Fossil, the shell is immediately there. Nothing needs to be downloaded, but it will not be visible. And there's also no danger when we talk about libraries that when I compile a certain piece of software that it detects the wrong library and links with the wrong library, because I always have the libraries in my environment that I exactly need and have defined for that development shell. So I'm almost through my presentation. Here are some links about learning Nix. There's a NixOS manual. It's always good to read the fine manual. There's a good wiki. There is a collection of small tutorial pieces called the Nix pills. Each one maybe takes you 15 minutes to work through, and they are thought like take 1 pill a day to learn your Nix. There's NixOps, which is a tool for deploying NixOS machines in a network or cloud. Basically, that is something like SaltStack or Ansible, but built on top of the Nix package manager. So you don't need to have an external tool, but if you need to deploy 100 machines that all look the same, NixOps is what you need. And there's the Nix developer information. Later on, you want to create your own packages and derivations. You can look there to find how you can contribute to the project. If you also want to learn more about Nix, there is the NixCon coming up, which has talks, discussion, and hacking. It's 16th to 17th of October this year. It's online, like everything is online these days. And there's a link where you can find more information and you can sign up. And I have prepared virtual machines with a NixOS installation for all of you. I have 50 virtual machines. It should be enough for everyone in the call. I also made some instructions, what you can do there, how you can explore the system. But before we dive into that, before we get our hands dirty and work with Nix and NixOS, do we have any questions?
Yeah, so I seem to be the only one who's actually written one in the chat. I'm sure others might chime in.
Peter, this is Charlie. I tried to leave something in the chat and it wouldn't let me type in there.
Did you, okay, did you try for the everyone or did you try for someone else?
I tried for everyone.
Okay, so.
But if you remember your question, now is the time.
Yeah, I was going to say that would be the best. I don't see any privileges that we can set whether you're allowed to chat or not.
Okay, if when I try to start an application, you say that nothing is loaded onto my hard drive. Does that mean that all the files for the application have to be downloaded from the net and somehow activated in order for me to run them locally? Where are the application files?
No, the application files are on storage, on hard disk. So the first time someone either has a declaration for a package or uses the Nix shell, the Nix package manager will download them either from the Nix cache, if they are available there, or if they are not available in the cache, it will download the source and will compile on your machine from source and then store them in the Nix store. So they are on your hard drive in the Nix store, but they are not necessarily linked to your environment. So you might not see them, you might not be able to use them unless you have configured them into your environment.
Okay.
Karsten?
Yes.
Question. This is Roger. I'm thinking about security and things coming out of Git, etc. I've read reports that there's a huge amount of code sitting out there that is not secure. And so who is making sure this stuff is safe to use and not polluted?
So this is a community project, and the security is very similar to other community project, I would say. The same problem is for Arch Linux and for Void, lesser so for Debian, because Debian has a larger team and they have more people that can do security audits on their infrastructure and code. But yes, this is a concern. It's the people of the project that look in the code, that review the code. But if there might be some bad person in the team that builds a backdoor somewhere. The source code is there, of course. That is what people that love open source always say. But there's a lot of source code, and not a single user can read all the source code once one installs on her system. So yeah, that's a problem. I don't see how that problem could be solved in the open source world, really. Of course, companies like Red Hat and SUSE and Canonical for Ubuntu, they can pay people who do security audits and look through the code of all the packages and see if the packages are good. Yeah, but for open source projects without a company behind that, because security audits, that would be quite a lot of work to do.
Thanks.
So it comes down to trust. And I wouldn't trust NixOS really sensitive information.
We'll tell the NSA that.
I mean, yeah, if they are behind, want to get my stuff, I'm lost anyway, I guess. But for sensitive stuff, I usually have a couple of notebooks with OpenBSD and good encryption.
So who is putting this stuff together? I mean, is it based on Debian? Is it coming out of God's goodwill, or what?
No, it's not based on Debian. It's a project team, a lot of people who work with Nix, and because of the environments, Nix attracts a lot of developer type of people, and developer type of people know how to compile code and package the code. So it's like Debian or Arch Linux. It's a couple of hundred people, and these people are maintainers of one or more packages in the store.
Thanks.
Karsten, somebody asked in the chat, I'm not sure if it was just a passing thought, but anyhow, it sounded interesting. Anyhow, can you compare or contrast to Fedora's Silverblue project? Are they related? Not really?
They are related maybe in the way that they want to have atomic updates, but not related in the way that is implemented. And also, Fedora Silverblue doesn't have the declarative approach. Basically, Silverblue is an operating system image which is mounted read-only and is immutable. So it is an operating system that is not not built iteratively like a normal Fedora, but it's very, very stable and locked. And also everything happens then in the home directories, mostly I think with Flatpak. I really like the idea of Fedora Silverblue. I try Silverblue once in a while, so every half year. And then I give up frustrated because I can't do the stuff that I need to do to get my work done. Because installing stuff on Silverblue and work with that is really, really hard. At least I find that. While I don't have that problem with Nix, of course, the learning curve for Nix was also very hard and sometimes frustrating for me. But after a month or so, I got the idea how that works internally. And from then on, it was pure joy. Didn't have that with Silverblue. Although I have Fedora Linux as my major driver on a couple of my laptops. And also I do Red Hat training courses, so I know my way around Fedora and Red Hat systems.
Cool, thank you. Any other questions from the group? I think you can unmute yourselves.
I do. The way you're presenting seems very much like a container-based system, like where you package everything up that is needed for a particular program, and then you run that as a self-contained container, and you can have multiple versions of those. They're all immutable and so on. And from that perspective, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the problem I have by calling that completely a rollback is all the configuration that is part of those. And let's take a simple example like a web server. There's a couple of configuration files that are pretty much telling the web server what to do and what other configuration files to look into. They're typically not part of container because that's what you really configure when you install it. So when I roll back, if there's an error in the configuration file is not rolled back typically. Does Nix change any of that, or how does it keep track of versions of data like that?
Basically, it's you configure both the packages and the configuration in the configuration files. And then the configuration files are versioned. So if you roll back, you also roll back to a previous declarative configuration, which has different statements how your configuration would look like. And the Nix system would then also change back your configuration to the previous state. Also about containers and compared to the Nix system, Nix is much more fine granular. In a container, if you have a web server there, you also have all the libraries that are needed for the web server. Like you have your OpenSSL for the web server, you have your PHP maybe for the web server in there in the same container. And in Nix, these would all be separate entities. Different packages are just linked into the environment. So it's how do I say? I'm not sure if you probably know Playmobil and Lego as the toys. Nix is more like Lego, and containers is more like Playmobil. So you can't really combine. So Playmobil is more bigger parts, and you can't build new stuff of them. If you buy a Playmobil fire station, it will always be a fire station. It will not be a space shuttle. You can build, maybe you can build a space shuttle out of a Lego fire station, and Nix is more like that. It's more smaller bricks.
Thank you. I need to unmute here. Thanks for the explanation.
So maybe if you like, and this is purely optional, I've created these virtual machines. And if you go to blog default routes /NixOS, and I put that in the chat as well. Let's see, where can I find the chat when I present it? When I'm presenting, here. More chat. So I have the link in the chat. You get this page. And I've taken the names of everyone who signed up for today. And there are the DNS names of the machine right off that. You look for your name, and then you can use the machine. You can either SSH directly into that name with the username of user and the password of NixOS, or you can go HTTPS, the name of the machine, port 1990. And there I've installed a Cockpit, which is a web-based management for Linux systems. And once you are in, you can sudo, because the machines you're logging in are Red Hat 8 machines or CentOS 8 machines. They are not NixOS machines, because DigitalOcean doesn't offer NixOS machines at this moment. But I've created a NixOS container that you can launch with sudo user local bin NixOS will start a Linux container. And then you can log in with root and NixOS. So, and I've created a few instructions like fixing the hardware configuration, install some global packages, install home manager, install user packages using the Nix shell. And if you like, you can try that out. And I will be here if you run into problems or you have questions. I will help, or I try to help at least. So these instructions should give you a little feel on how a Nix OS system works. So Xavier is not on there. Then use number 43. So I pasted a link again because I just sent that on a private chat the first time. Sorry for that.
Sorry, what is the user I should be logging in with?
For the first user is user.
So basically user, something like user, SSH user at nixos42.dane.onl. Is that right?
Exactly.
That does not seem to work for NixOS 07.
Okay.
Nope, nope, just typing in the wrong password. Sorry about that.
So Carsten, in step 7, it looks like you have like 3 dots in the configuration file. Is that just because I need to add other values, or are those 3 dots really the syntactual?
That is actually syntactual. This is an import of subroutines or functions from the main Nix. So you need to really type that in exactly.
I will do that. Yep. Oh, I made 4 dots and not 3 dots. Still 1. I was trying to copy and paste it, but it is not working on my side.
It is not working or no working?
Not working. Oh, nope, now it works. Copy and paste. Something was wrong. Carsten, do you have an example of, let's say, a web server where the configuration is part of that instruction file? So I'd sort of like to see how that is done.
No, haven't prepared that for this talk.
I realized that. I was just, well, maybe I shouldn't do it for documentation, but.
It should be somewhere in the Nix documentation, but I would have to look for that as well. Yeah, no.
Try.
So I just pasted in the chat a link to the documentation on how to configure the Nginx web server with Nix. And that has an example on how a configuration would look like.
Yeah, I found something similar on the Apache side, and it's not really giving me the file, which means it seems like it's mapping some of the configuration options that are part of a web server configuration. And that scares me because I don't think it has even remotely close to the same number of options.
That's true. It's not the full number of options, but then it's once you learned a little bit about the Nix language, it's then easy to create your own derivation and add the options that are missing.
Okay. Seems okay.
Same is also true for Ansible SaltStack. I mean, if you look at the Ansible support modules, you, at least from what I've seen, you can't control every single aspect of an Nginx or an Apache from an Ansible.
Sure you can. Ansible just basically is a template language, right? So I can take my configuration that I've made work and go and create a template out of it where I replace a couple of
Yes,
variables, like host names and all that, and now I have a generic configuration that I can set.
But that is then exactly what you would do with Nix as well, with the Nix language.
Well, not if I'm going to have to put them into this configuration. It's a different syntax now.
Yeah, it is. Yes, that's true.
And I'm also not seeing where does it put in the web files, meaning, so once I have my configuration file, I have my PHP files, all the other stuff that needs to be part of my web server. They seem to not be part of the configuration now. I need to copy them in just like I would do with Ansible. And so they won't roll back, right?
Yeah, exactly. That wouldn't work. You can't really have all like binary images and fonts and CSS and JavaScript and everything that in one configuration file there. That would be still external. Although that might be in Nix Ops. I haven't looked deeply into that one, because that is really the solution for people that use Ansible, Terraform, or the like.
Mhm. So did you say you are a Red Hat trainer or you take training?
No, I do Red Hat trainings, but I'm not doing official Red Hat trainings. So it's not the official Red Hat stuff. For example, this week I did a 4-day Red Hat 8 update training at Linux Hotel in Germany. Okay. For various reasons, I don't work with training material that other people have created. So I don't train the Red Hat stuff. I don't train the LPI stuff or something like that. I always have my own stuff.
It sounds good. I was just wondering if you heard about the image builder and how you sort of saw that as that next step on the idea that I can make my own images to deploy. So once I've created it once, I can deploy it many, many times.
Heard about that, but really haven't looked deeply into that.
It's basically a user-friendly Kickstart.
So, Carsten,
yes,
I've been playing around with the system that you have set up. Thanks for that. So my understanding is when you start using the system, you really have a bare bone system, and you're basically during the first week or so, you're just going to be rebuilding your system to add more and more stuff. That's how it's supposed to work?
At least that's how I work with the system, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I realized, oh, if I need this, I mean, even on a minimum, Debian or whatever system, usually you have enough things to play around, but it seems that this one is really, really small, and you need to pick up everything that you need.
Yes, that is what you do the first time. But for example, this summer, I had to buy a more beefier laptop. Got a new one, and then I just installed the basic NixOS on that, and then I copied from my old laptop. I copied the home.nix and configuration.nix over, did a rebuild, and I had exactly the same copy on the new machine with all the packages I had on the old machine before, and that was a really, really nice experience. So okay. Yeah, first time you have to build your configuration. Maybe it's similar to how people build their Emacs configurations. These also tend to grow and grow and grow, and then you carry them around all your life.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, I know that I'm doing that for some configuration files that I'm using. I'm carrying those config files around where I get a new account. So, but in this case, that means that you can like carry your whole system configuration, basically.
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
I'm trying to do a graceful logout. How do you end up the actual Nix OS?
You do a power off.
Inside. So I have to log in as root and then do power off.
Yes, and then it will shut down the container, and you are back in the CentOS system.
Okay. There we go. Okay. Thanks for setting that up.
If anyone is interested, I'm happy to share the Ansible script that I'm used to set that up.
The more the merrier. I mean, if you're open to it, once we get your presentation and video up, maybe we can have a link to the Ansible script too.
So the presentation is currently is HTML. I can make a PDF out of it. What do you prefer?
If it's the HTML is publicly available, we can link to it. If you
yeah.
do it that way.
It's on blog default roots talks NixOS.
Well, Roger, you might be able to grab that, or we will get you the links afterwards. But I just, of course, won't have the recording until later today. I hope. Hope this works. Roger maintains our website. Oh, now I see what I did wrong. I did not have a colon at the end. I had a semicolon on the first line. Ah, okay. This is what happens when you put on your glasses.
Yeah, what I will do is I will publish the Ansible scripts just on this page here. I will add them at the end, and I will also add some instructions how to set up the container with NixOS on any systemd enabled Linux system without Ansible. So if someone just needs to have a one-shot container to work with, that would work as well, because it's just downloading a tarball, untarring that to the disk, and then start the container. It's 3 commands done.
I'm wondering if anyone here on the call normally work with containers. Do you guys have any kind of observations or how this works in compare as a, in this case, as a user of them, because you're not creating them?
What was the question you asked, Peter?
I'm just asking if you normally work with containers, do you have any kind of impression about the difference between how this works versus the old-fashioned, let's call them Docker containers now, how they work?
It does feel very containerish, and I think you mentioned that earlier, but
it does. The only difference is I would not use a system in a container for personal use. When I feel that this one you can, personalize and use it as like a day-to-day system. For me, a container is like a small server-ish kind of thing. This one, it feels that it could be your machine, but yeah, definitely like managed like a container.
Yeah, but be careful. That I use a systemd container here is just a matter of because DigitalOcean didn't have a native NixOS offering. So usually you would run NixOS directly on your bare metal.
This reminds me a lot of Rancher OS, actually, where you have a very, very base OS, and on top of it, everything is a container. In Rancher's case, there's 2 containers too. There's a system container and where you put, and like syslog is its own container, for instance, and then that. So that's also what it feels like.
Yeah, that's Silverblue, right? I mean, they came out of the Atomic project, and so the Silverblue is created like that, but just with GUI in mind, which is why there's other ways to do containers too. But if you look at what used to be CoreOS, same idea, right? Very minimal OS, and everything is a container on top. And once you get used to it, it's very easy to use. But every command is more or less isolated. So this idea that you just put them all together and make them work together is a little more tricky in those kind of environments. And I think this may be the same thing. That's what I'm seeing, right? Once I'm in Python, I can do all kinds of Python. Once I'm out of it, it's not there anymore, right? So if I had another command that needed Python, I need to do some magic to have them both available at the same time.
Yeah, I used Python here as an example. If you need Python all the time, you would put Python into your home.nix, and then the user would have that all the time. What's nice here is you can have a Python 3.1 and 3.2 and 3.7 and 3.8 all at the same time and switch between the environments.
Yeah, I think you, Carsten, had made a comment about environments shape. So yes, then spot on that comment.
So I think it's interesting you're using systemd nspawn. I last tried it a couple of years ago on RHEL 7 and also the latest Fedora at the time, and really couldn't get it to work. There was a lot of SE Linux issues, but did you say you were running systemd nspawn on CentOS 8? Is that right?
Yes.
And I take it have you noticed any usability issues, or does it work pretty much like a normal Linux instance?
It works pretty much like normal. I use systemd nspawn really, really often. It is my my preferred container solution. I also use Podman and Docker, but these are more heavyweight, and systemd nspawn is very lightweight. So on my, for example, I have a Gopher server instance that I've written in Lua, and because I don't trust my own code, this is configured as a systemd socket unit listening on the Gopher port. And whenever someone connects to the Gopher port, it spawns a new systemd nspawn container containing the actual server. Then the server serves the request and then terminates immediately again. And that is fast enough. So it's the containers spawning really, really fast. There's almost no overhead in CPU and memory. At least you can't really measure it. And then the container is gone again, but you still have fairly good isolation of your processes against each other.
That's really cool because I am very interested in the classic, the kind of classic idea of containers as like another operating system instance that acts a lot like an operating system. So I've spent a lot of time with Podman and Docker containers recently, but kind of reluctantly, kind of learning all the orchestration and everything just to do things like have a little bit more containment for things like WordPress, when I'd really much rather a traditional container methodology. So I'll have to go back to systemd nspawn, and since it seems like it's grown up quite a bit.
If you have in this series, if you have a slot free at any point of time, I could could pull out the systemd nspawn part of my training, and yeah, we can do that here.
That'd be great. Want me to just send you a note offline?
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Is everyone still working on their little demo system? I'm just wondering, should we end the recording here and then just do use the last half hours for some other, if there's topics, or
fine with me.
Everyone is still working, want to ask questions, we'll let it run for the rest of the hour.
Yeah, I will publish some instructions how to replicate the environment on a local machine, so everyone then can, if there's a need for create our own local instance of NixOS in a container and use that to play more.
That would be great.
Yeah, Peter, if you want to close out the recording, we'll just treat this as lab time. I'm not saying we need to leave, but I'm not sure that there's a lot of give less for John to sift through. I don't know. What do you think?
I'm just wondering, you know, if, I don't want to stop the recording if people are still working and may have questions, but if not, we can stop the recording here and see if there are topics or maybe there are types of questions to Carsten while he's here. And I think it's almost dinner time for Carsten anyway.
That is okay. The little one doesn't need to go to bed this early today because it's weekend.
Lucky him. I'm pretty sure he's happy. Or she.
Party.
Yep. Okay, I'll stop the recording and see what happens, but I'll stay on here for a little while if you have questions or questions for Carsten. But before I do that, thank you very much, Carsten. This was very enlightening and very interesting to see. I'd never seen anything with this kind of a mixture before. So that was pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.